Coaching is different because a lot of it is not what you know, it's who you know. Is continuing to develop, getting into domains that you don't know so you understand them better, because it's going to make you a better coach. I always say to kids, it's better off learning to play several positions, master, because you can be the first thing you're looking at. You can only have 23 on a team sheet.
Do you want to help your child or player become a professional player? Today we're going to look into some of the details of how coaches and parents can help their kids find the right agent and how a good agent can enhance their careers. Nige Gainey, welcome to the show.
How are you getting on?
Good, thanks. So before we get into some of the horror stories that have happened to you over your career, what inspired you to become an agent and what does that role entail?
Towards the end of my professional career, I did get into coaching youth rugby, which I very, very much enjoyed. And then I met up with someone who was starting out as a player agent. And I guess in the beginning, it's about helping people. And initially, my thinking and what I was looking to do was to help foreign players adapt to France, more so that than the contractual part of thing. But it just basically rolled on. And so by contacting players, French and foreign, I ended up starting with a lot of French youth players, contrary to what I was initially wanting to set out to do. So that was good because it sort of went along with what I was doing in the coaching for young French players. When I'm talking about that, the guys they were sort of 19, 20, 21 at the time, my first full clients. And then it just rolled on from there. And then you sort of find yourself taking on a role or different roles with the players and helping them develop their careers. Now, what does it enroll? It's about managing their players as far as their careers, working on opportunities, because it's always a question of opportunities. Like a sporting career, no matter where you are, is very short if you make it into the professional career. And we have a role very, very important starting off with parents is ascertaining the real levels of the young players, spending a lot of time talking with parents, because we normally don't contact players directly. We go through their parents, especially if they're under 18 or minor. And it's monitoring young players' progressions, speaking with their parents what they can expect, and also reminding parents and players that not everyone makes it. So schooling, studying, forming yourself, whether it be manually or academically, is a very, very important feature for me, especially in those initial years after you leave school, because as I reiterate, not all the players make it to a professional level, and or you also have injuries, and some career injuries can stop that all happening very, very quickly. So we've got to be I'm very aware of helping the parents to understand and what they can expect.
And so for those parents, at what stage should they start initiating contact or start thinking that their child needs an agent?
Look, as I said, you see a lot of good youth players coming through. Some obviously dominate physically because of their size very, very early. It's a little bit different to football, where I think you have a lot of parents all around the world with their kids just getting them to wanting them to make a lot of money so they can take the whole family up for the rest of their lives. Rugby, we're not quite like that. We start looking at players, I guess, around the 15, 16 years old. Obviously, down where I'm based in the southwest, you have a cream of a lot of the top youth, watching all the professional clubs in the age grades playing each other. So you're getting all the best kids in their age groups playing against each other regularly. So it gives you a good idea of the levels and of the capacities of the players. And then it's meeting with parents when the clubs start talking to the youth, or especially when they start making training squads for the national. You start in under 17, don't you? Under 18s, under 19s, and under 20s. And especially if they start getting a look in with the professional teams, whether it be top 14 or Pro D2. So that's basically when we start. It can be very amicable. It's building a relationship with the parents as well, and that doesn't always work. We're not all the same, as you know. And I'm not a storyteller or a dream maker, so I give it to them pretty straight up. Some like that, and some think their child is the best rugby player that's ever put foot on earth. So you've got to assess that information, decide if you want to carry on and help them on, or it's not going to happen.
And is there anything a coach can be doing to help that player in that transition, or just make that process a bit easier?
Well, look, coaches are having a massive, an important role at this stage, and at no matter what coaching level, don't get me wrong, but in a professional level, so even though the young men are not professionals, but they're playing in an elite competition, so they're playing against the best of their age group around nationwide. So there is an important that these coaches are capable of mentally giving out the right messages. Is it about winning? Is it about competing? Every player that goes on the rugby field doesn't want to lose. They all want to win. And they also have a role within their club, which is extremely important, is to develop the players. So, you've got levels, of what you're looking to do for a player who's going from 10 to 12. So when he goes to the next level, he's acquired all the attributes to take that next level, because every time they go up a level, their first year. So you have this physical difference between a guy who's born at the end of the year and a guy who's born at the beginning of the year. So every time they go up, there's another level. So that's physical, and it's also mental and technical. So all your training staff should do have a good level of understanding what they're looking to do at that age, and how to prepare the players. Obviously, you get the exceptional players who leapfrog, who are ready at an early age, and then it's just managing to monitor that, and so that how they mold into the collective side of the team. So they have a massive role, yeah.
And with those players, is there anything specific you are looking for around that age group?
The first thing you notice with the player is when he stands out, when he does something. Obviously I have an eye more on the from the number 9s to number 15s. If you see a young fella pushing the scrum and he's pushing his man up and over the back, well, obviously he's got attributes. But yeah, it's looking to see the difference. When you watch games, different to watching on video, you get a whole idea of the field. You look at their work rate. You look at the capacity to repeat efforts. And sometimes you just get the workhorses who are very, very interesting, who are just in there all the time, doing everything right, not standing out, but present, turning up to places we never thought they'd turn up. So it's like looking at professional rugby players, but just they're younger. So you're looking at that. And also a very important thing, and I think this is very important for coaches, we do quite a bit of monitoring of parents. So if you see a kid who turns up and he's 12 and he's 6 foot already, and mum and dad are 5'1", you're probably thinking, well, maybe this kid's finished growing. But coaches are very aware of that as well, because that can be a sign. As I said, you do get young kids that come through who dominate just because they're so much bigger and stronger. We've obviously got the situation in New Zealand with a lot of the Polynesian the Polynesian kids who are just very, very big, very, very young, and so they dominate. It's just natural. So we're looking at a lot of things, but we're looking just at generally good young rugby players.
So, is there anything that will stop you from signing a player? Any sort of values or actions that a player you might see that will say, "Oh, look, I don't want to be representing this player."
I guess it comes down to what he thinks about himself. It's a little bit tough at a young age because they all want to be professional rugby players. And that's what they say. But if you have a player that's orientated, or especially his parents, at a young age, just to the financial side of things, that's always a bit of an alert. It sort of sends a radar all over the place when I hear that, because at that age, I always say that will come. But seen so many cases where young players, when they're making it into the Aspires and they start getting games, and the clubs go berserk and want to pay a fortune for them, and then all of a sudden, 1 or 2 years down the line, because they dominated in age grade rugby and they've stopped and they haven't worked hard as the other kids and progressed, all of a sudden they become just very average players and just fall off the radar. Is that their fault? I do believe so. Is that the fault of the parents sometimes? I do believe so as well. And if people aren't prepared to listen, this is how I see it and how I want to work. Other people are very different. Other agents, obviously, but it's just my perception, because I like to base it on confidence. We don't decide for the young man. We don't decide for the parents, but our role is here to help them make the right decision at the right time. That they're not doing something, moving somewhere without reason, for the wrong reasons. And sometimes they can just be purely financial.
And so, are you hands-on with any of these decisions? Like, are you constantly talking with them, expressing your opinion of how they should be evolving, training, or is that more left to the clubs once they're signed?
It is left to the clubs, because we also look after a lot of coaches and coaching staff, and that's also a very important role, and that's also a confidence thing. You're not there to force coaches that you look after to take on players who, he wants to tie their pot. You say, "Well, I've got a winger for you, take them on." That's not going to work. So there's got to be a confidence role there. And also, you're not going to step in between a relationship between a player and a coach. I don't personally. That's what they see. However, if it's not working out and in a certain environment, that's when we look at other options, because it can happen. Coach doesn't necessarily like a player, and there's one very, very, very important thing, whether it be on all age. You have what they call a succession plan, where every position, the clubs are looking at their professional roster. They're looking at what they've got in the youth between 16, 18, and 24. Obviously, things like front row and lock, and where development is a lot later, but they're also looking there. So if you have a young player who's a good player, who you believe can make it, at least to start off his professional career, but in the environment he's in, he's not going to get the game time because he's got too many people in front of him, then that's when you start talking. That's when you start contacting other clubs. And also, what else? Things can happen where it's going well for a player. New coaching staff comes in. They don't have the same visions of the player as what the previous staff did. And then that again is another situation when you have to look moving around. And also, it's a player. Doesn't make the efforts, mucks around, doesn't work hard, is lazy, it can stop a lot quicker. That's what I remind them of. This can all stop a lot quicker than all the efforts and all the years you've been doing to get to the situation. Because we all play rugby, and every kid who's ever played rugby or any sport always wants to be someone that's running around. He's running around on the television, playing, scoring tries, kicking goals, doing big hits, jumping in the lineouts, or pushing people off. Pushing people off the ball and scrums and things like that. So we've just got to be very, very careful, help them manage and help them develop that. Because it is a very, very short time. And also, I think it's also about helping the player go to his maximum of his ability, or very close to it. I always say to a player, and especially when you're starting off building a relationship with them and their parents, set your goals. Don't set them too high, or too quickly. And especially it's to go to the maximum, play to the maximum, train to the maximum, develop to the maximum. Once you've done that, you've done the best you can. And that's the most, no matter what level you get to or you finish with. And it's always about enjoying. Because at age grade rugby, for example, in France, I believe that the Crowbar-Splits is a national under-18 competition. It is the best. It's equivalent of back home of playing first 15 rugby. First 15 rugby's amazing. You're playing, everyone's the same age. You're playing against all the best players in your country or your region. And then from there, once you move out of that, then you're starting off another thing in a professional environment where it's all different. You've got some kids training with the pros, come back, you don't have all that time together, you don't have the same bonding, and it all changes. So it's to make the most of that.
And so what would be a realistic timeline for a player to go from that 15, 16 to actually getting a full-time professional contract? What's sort of the general age that they actually make it?
Now, obviously in France, we cannot sign a professional contract until the age of, the 21st year, 22nd year. But obviously you have the academies and you have the Espoir contracts. So you have the academy, which within the clubs is the club's obligation to feed, house, accompany the player, whether it be in his last year of high school and through his initial studies and formation. So that is an obligation of the two parties. And then you have the next step on there is it is a form of a professional contract. It's called an Espoir contract, and that's the party that pays for the rugby. Okay, so they are two separate things. They go together. You cannot have one, or you can have an academy contract without a Espoir contract, but you cannot have an Espoir contract without academy. So you have players who start playing top 14 and Pro D2, I'd say especially in the backs, which is obviously, it can be around 19, 20. Some guys get their noses in at 18. Maybe not on a regular base, but training regularly with the pros, doing pre-seasons, so they get the idea of what it's like, because that again, it's a massive step up. So that also allows coaches to analyze and review the players. So you're looking around, between the 18 and 21.
And you're obviously based in France. What are some of the processes that the French do that you really like, and maybe some things you'd think would be better to change?
I think we're on the French rugby union. What they have done, they've caught up as far as player development goes, player analysis, player sightings, where they group regionally and then nationally all the best kids from 16 through to 1920, and they've really put a massive effort into that. Hence the results in age grade rugby for the French teams. They've won 2 or 3 under 20 championships. Their under 18s always perform extremely well. So that's about spotting talent, and they've taken it away from where they used to have it all done. They used to take the best under 18, under 19 players and stick them up in Paris at Marshalsea. And apart from becoming pros at PlayStation, they took them away from their clubs and tried to build into the league, but it sort of did work. But you're taking them away from the essence in France, which is the clubs. So all these different rugby cultures that they brought up in, and they develop, and allowing their coaches within the clubs to see them on a regular basis, which we've always done, I guess, in New Zealand. But they've, especially in the last 10 years, really, really put the foot on the pedal to accelerate that, and it's obtained results, and it's allowing more and more young players to be in a position to play Pro D2, top 14, and hence the French national team, which is obviously another level. However, that covers. I think there was a study done, I think, and they were saying that basically out of the current French teams in the last 5 years, maybe 70 to 75% of the players playing the French team, or who have played, have come through the systems. So there's still room for another 20, 25% of players, playing regionally, and then all of a sudden being outstanding, but being picked up a little bit later and not going through the seam. So it's about scale. They scale the nation, the talent, and develop the players, but develop them firstly within their clubs, and then nationally, where they've got guidelines of what they're looking to do, physically, mentally, technically, for players in certain positions. So they've really taken it off. Whereas before, when I first got here, I saw there was more talent than I'd ever seen. First played touch rugby, it was hard to work out, apart from big pot bellies in the front row, who were the forwards at the back. So they could pass off both hands, they could step. It was like, wow. I'd never seen that in New Zealand. Your props and your locks didn't touch the ball, did they? They just hit rucks and smashed people, and they weren't allowed to touch the ball nowadays. So fortune rugby's developed there.
And any things they can improve on that you've seen compared to other countries?
I guess that they've really bridged that gap in the last 10 years and accelerated in the last 5 years, whereas I think they were a bit behind. Obviously, the player base in France is massive. They've made efforts to improve the number of actually French qualified who can qualify for playing for the national team, playing at the top level. But as you know, there are still a lot of non-French players competing in the competitions, and not just your professional divisions, but all around, because there is money. There's money in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 divisions, where that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So that can be a hindrance. A lot of positions, I guess the front row, a lot of positions are right throughout the divisions are taken up by non-French qualified. So I guess harden the rules on that, which they already have done with the GIF put into place, so French qualified. But then again, you can be foreign, become GIF, but not play for France. So that's probably something, if they really want to take it another step further, they can develop even more young talent.
Yeah, I've actually noticed that over the last 2 years, some clubs are actually going to the UK and Ireland and trying to pick up those 17, 18-year-olds who haven't made academies.
Yeah.
How do you work with clubs to get those players, or are you actively going into those countries as well to look for players?
Yes. You have tendencies. Obviously, front row is a lot of Georgian players, and you get them into the academy, so they become GIF. Locks, you have a lot of young South African lads. Now, I don't want to categorise anything, but it is how it is. Especially down the southwest here, we don't have too many kids running around who are 18. If you do, you have everyone's jumps on his back and say, running him down in the street and say, mate, you play rugby? If not, okay, you're going to. Obviously, Fijian boys are outside backs. So without categorising, you are. And obviously the clubs need volumes as well. Look at the professional clubs, they can up to 35 professional players, and you've got your academy players who come into the mix. So that's a lot of players that you need multiplied by the number of the clubs. So yes, there has been a tendency of bringing in non-French players to develop, especially again, whereas in your succession plan you don't have that profile and you cannot find it, or if in France there is, all the top clubs are fighting over it. So what can we guarantee his development is maybe game time a little bit earlier compared to your top clubs. So there's a lot of competition. So if they can't get it within, they do look out. But that has sort of slowed down because, again, it's the same thing. When you take on a player into your academy when he's, let's say, 17, there's still no guarantee that you're going to sign a professional contract for that player. So, and when you're investing in a non-French player, there's a lot more time, there's a lot more effort, and the financials. So you have as many non-French players that don't make it as you do French.
And arguably the top 14 is one of the best competitions in the world, if not the best. And you have special access sort of behind the scenes within those clubs. What are you seeing that they're doing that are putting them ahead?
I think the biggest difference possibly, you can compare the passion of the rugby, the real passion of the rugby is probably France and South Africa. They still treasure the Currie Cup. A little bit different in South Africa now because a lot of their internationals are playing overseas in Japan. So they've found their niche, their solution. But the passion is still very strong here because it is, people associate themselves to a club, to a town, to a village. And that no matter what level you play in, that passion is important. So it's very, very easy for young players to motivate themselves. And it's very easy for the clubs to be enthusiastic about what they're doing, because naturally you're bringing a lot of people to the stadiums. Naturally, that's creating revenue, which is so important, because they are run like businesses, and if all of a sudden no people start turning up, that's going to take a hole out of your budget, which also allows you to develop players. Everyone's constantly working on better ways. How do we develop? How do we fast track? But then again, the level is getting harder and harder, tougher and tougher. So I guess the big move they have made down the clubs, a lot of them, is they're really putting in a lot of effort to develop players in the under-18s. So when I say develop, it's, as I said, it's mentally develop them, physically. Now, you're not going to the gym 10 hours a day every day, and just more specifics in their roles, in their positions, so that when they take that next step up, they've got the core roles of their positions. And also another big tendency, Nick, is everywhere is versatility in their playing positions. Front rows, I'm a tight head. Okay, play loose head. Oh, I don't want to play loose head. Learn how to play. Same thing, loose head, tight head. Locks. They all have their big number 5 Becky's boater, 130 keys, 2.5 meters high, and smashes people. But you've got to have your line out forwards and all the beanpole, etc. But that versatility is now coming to a second row, back row, and your back row. Okay, big ball carrying number 8, but they're moving that 6, 7, 8 where they're playing a lot, and sometimes what we call our blindside flanker, who's tall, he's moving to that lock to finish games, or vice versa. 9-10s has always been a big thing over here. I always say to the kids, it's better off learning to play several positions, master, because you're going to be the first thing you're looking at. You can only have 23 on a team sheet. And if you can cover several positions at a good level. So there's a lot of effort going into that as well. So I think that's very, very positive. But yeah, as I say, it's everything's very vulnerable financially, because we have to think about the financial health of the clubs. So they're working extremely hard in that area, as well as performing. And obviously, with promotion and relegation, it's always about performing.
Yeah, that's really interesting around the player development. That's where their biggest focus is. I just want to move on to coaches now. And for an amateur coach who's looking to make that transition into professional coaching, at what point should they look for an agent? Do they need an agent? And how does that process look?
Coaching is different because a lot of it is not what you know, it's who you know. Head coaches always have their favourite assistants, whether it be forwards, backs, defence, line out, scrum, S&C, physios. And a manager in that will always, 90% of the time, move his squad around. So it is a lot of that. I think it's good for coaches, amateur coaches, to work on what they know best when they're starting. Is what field do you want to span out, but it's especially mastering something where you understand and you can read and you can analyze, because that's always going to be the point where you're going to fall back on. I know coaches all think they can be top 14 managers, but that's not always the case. It's the same for a player. However, he could be very, very good in his domain, even while developing on other things. And there's a lot of role changes now in coaching, where you're not asked just to do one thing, or you might start on something, but you have the capacity to double up. How many scrum coaches are also doing outs? How many scrum coaches are also doing defence round rucks, or line out defence, and vice versa. In the backs, it's attack, but it can also be defence. S&C as well. So at what stage? I think it's important for young coaches to get, everyone knows people in the professional environment, it's calling up your buddies. Can I come in? Can you get me in there? I just come in and have a look for 3 or 4 days. Can I sit into coaches meetings? Can I sit into your planning? I think that's really, really important, because it gives them an idea, and then developing that to the level that they're playing, also with their ideas, and then putting a stamp on the game, how they want it to be played. Because you have that, and you also have the management. Now, managing 17-year-old kids is a pleasure. That's not always the case with professional rugby players with egos and issues and everything like that, you see. So, but I do recommend that they get out and about, even if it's moving countries, and everyone knows everyone somewhere, or lots of people. And a lot of the coaches do that, and that's how they do pick up jobs, and that's how we get to meet coaches in all aspects, and yeah, so it's different to players, because it's more not what you know, it's who you know. And obviously, if you are very good at what you do, you're always going to find a job, and obviously we have a role there where we can facilitate as introducing. But sometimes a lot of that's already done. Or a coach might say, look, I've got this guy I've been working with, he's really good. I think he's not always going to be here with me, but it'd be good for you to help him because he deserves better. Maybe within the club it is a negotiated contract, or moving on where he can actually take on a role higher than he's actually doing. So,
and how do clubs contact you and begin the process? And then what does that look like till the club reaches out to sign a player?
Obviously, we're in contact with all the clubs all the time, building relationships with the coaching staff, building a relationship with the director of rugby, which sometimes can be the manager or the head coach. with the deciders in the clubs, the presidents who you always negotiate with, and you're always pertinently looking for what the succession plans, what the profiles they think they require for next year. They've got players off contract. Where they're out, are they going to re-sign? Are they not going to re-sign? All the positions. So it's permanent. That it's they no longer no shorter than starting off this season when the French season starts off in July 1. But let's say mid-July the guys are back in, getting flogged again for another 10 months on the field. They're already looking for the positions and the profiles of players that they require for the next season, and the youth as well through the academy. So it is permanent. The signings of the players, and obviously all your top players are off contract. All that stuff happens quickly, and then you have the intermediates. A lot of it's renewals, but it is all year round. It's not just we're going to transfer base and then we just poof. The clubs are active. The clubs are asking about players, asking about coaching staff. Then you have the accidents, where lack of results means that whenever you see a team's not having results and losing and blah blah blah, and the president or the head of the club comes out in the press and says, the coaching staff have my whole and full support. That's when about a week later they're all gone. That's for us exactly when someone says that. So you've got that. You've got changes mid-drift. So it's extremely tough role coaching. But the good thing about it, I think it's just like, again, going to a player and saying, guy's played 10 all his life, and said, well, but you've got attributes to play 12, different France or fullback, because because you've got a good pace, you've got a good boot. It's that diversity, the versatility of profiles, and because it's going to help you develop as a player. And I think there was a really good thing on Bogan Barrett on Channel Plus about his 10 and 15, and he explained that very, very simply and very well what works for him. It's the same for the coaching staff. Is continuing to develop, getting into domains that you don't know, so you understand them better, because it's going to make you a better coach. And I remember a big thing about a lot of when I first started working, or even before I started working as an agent, but you're meeting up, especially with a lot of Australian coaching staff. The Australian coaching staff, a lot of them had a big S&C background. So I always found that great, because they have an understanding of how the body works. So they have an understanding of how to push when you take the step off. And you can relate to your S&C coaches, because you know exactly what they're doing. And that's important, because you're going to manage players over seasons, highs, lows, injuries, fatigue. So, every little domain you can have an idea of, an understanding of. It's got to make you a better coach, in the big picture.
How do you develop players and coaches mentally for the professional game?
Very, very, very good question. I don't think we can ascertain how important mental preparation, mental work, mental development is for athletes, or everybody. The brain is a very complicated thing and can send out the wrong messages at the wrong time. And individually, I think players and coaches, a lot of them are turning to help outside of the rugby circle, because a head coach and the coaching staff are managing 35 professionals. They've got 15 in the academy, don't always have time to do that. And, mental preparation is not, half an hour before the game, banging your head together and saying, I'm mentally prepared, and headbutting your mate before you go on the field to make sure he's ready, It's about learning about yourself and helping iron out, especially the things which affect you and can affect and affect performances. And it's not about having demons, but we're all there. So we asked the question to a couple of young players who are now working with people outside of the club, where the club are very open to that, because for them, if they can have a player who's performing more consistently, who's better, who's becoming a better young man or an older person, and that can develop, that's all benefit. That's all benefit to the team, isn't it? So we asked the guys, okay, guys, 100%. You've got 100%. We've got a square here or a triangle or a octagon, wherever you want. You've got physical preparation, technical preparation, collective preparation, mental preparation, right? 4 things. What percentage do you give mental preparation? Oh, 50, 60. How's that? Well, I'm always thinking about my game on the weekend while I'm training the week. Okay. Let's put that into time. Now, a lot of them come up with the mental preparation. So you've got 20 hours in the week. Yep. How much is that done in S&C training? 8. Right? Got 12 left. How much do you do in individual positional forward scrum training? Oh, 6, 14. We've got 6 left. How much did you collective? Oh, 6? No, that's 22, mate. Okay. So you actually find, and how much do you mental preparation? Or none, actually. When I say that, individual. So they think they're doing stuff, but they're not actually doing stuff. You know, a lot of it's talking to professionals who help athletes, who help people, as I say, iron out the bugs, clarify. It's all about clarification. You know, it's a windy and wet day. You can't control that. So you don't worry about it. You just adapt the way you're going to play, but you don't worry about it. A lot of things like that, which has become a big factor. Helping coaches, especially head coaches, to manage players better, to deal with situations, understanding when things are going well, where do we go from here, understanding when to take the foot off, because you're pushing, not getting results. The players aren't responding. Workloads, communicating better with your staff, and the medical side, and for players for that, and that can start at any age. Really, it's exercises. You know, that's why always it's hard for them. But when the young players come through the academy, they're actually learning something outside of rugby, because you're not playing rugby 40 hours a week or training 40 hours a week or 100 or 200. You know, there's a lot of time in the day, and taking a step away, doing other stuff, developing yourself personally. You know, I always give an example to, you know, when they think it's tough, I said, well, how do you think Rafael Nadal or all these top tennis players, you know, they've been doing since they're 6 months. They've been doing dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of hours every week to get there. You know, that's the top level. And all those players and, you know, the top 100, 200 players in the world work 10, 100 times harder than you ever have to do to play rugby. So you just got to put it in perspective. So you do have time and develop themselves mentally. Yeah, that's a very, very important role, because you can become better individually and collectively.
And do you have a story you could share around that of significance?
I guess it's sort of very early in the early stages, to be honest, Nick, because, you know, players becoming better athletes. They're stronger, faster, run longer. You're always looking to develop, you know, skills like out the back door, backhand passes, going through. Technically, they're developing. Collectively, they're getting more, taking more initiatives. So that's all naturally. But how is by personal training they can become even better? But it's quite early, so I don't really have any where a guy's gone from or a player or a young player has gone from there to, because it's not like it happens like that. As I say, the brain's a pretty shifty piece of goods, So it's about gaining confidence, knowing yourself better, loving yourself better, and when things don't go wrong, it doesn't matter. Sometimes, well, give you one thing. Was talking to a coach and said, he's got this problem. Beginning of games, he makes a mistake, and it happens regularly. And if it starts with another one, they sort of chain over or chain on. I spoke to the mental or the mental coach that he was going to work with this young player, and he goes, "How many minutes are in a game?" 80. Yeah, well, at least 80. But we go on for about 2 hours these days, all stoppages and things. So what if you make a mistake in the first minute of the game? It's not going to cost the game. It's not important. Just stuff really, really obvious that, we don't look at. And it has made him a better player because he's making less mistakes. Well, if he does make a mistake now, the beginning of the game, could be nerves, but everyone has them. The next thing after, he's doing something right. So that's helping, but it's also, they watch it, they understand the game, but they're looking out of the circle and just seeing things that are so easy for them to pick up, which, coaches and players can't, or they see it in a different way and they address it a different way.
And so what are some of the biggest challenges rugby agents face in this current era?
Look, we go along with the environment. So that environment is the general health of rugby in the country you're working in. If I speak to our colleagues in the UK, they've gone through the Premiership losing 2 clubs. There's been a lot of, less money. They've really struggled because the rugby economy has struggled, because the economy has struggled. So the rugby economy has struggled. People are struggling, so they're not going to games. So we are very much all part of that. And that's just, no matter what field of work you work in, it's all about the environment. If the environment's healthy, you've got a healthy environment. If it's not, it's not. I think we have to innovate a lot. And when we're innovating, we're helping the clubs. I think the company I work for is very innovative. We work around the world. We have been here for a long time. We're developing. And it's with experience that, look, you can't make everything happen, but you can make a lot. People don't change. People are always the same. You got good eggs, bad eggs, whether it be agents who look after their own personal interests and not necessarily the players. You have players, you have parents of players, and you have some people in clubs. So you've just got to deal with that. You don't have to like everyone. You can't like everyone. But I think it's about innovating, especially since COVID. But the COVID period was, I think, a very, very good period for us to reflect, and also on clubs. We had to help the clubs out a lot as well, financially. Obviously, it was very different in France to the UK and NZ. Every country dealt their own way. But it just managed to take a step back and say, well, how can we get better? How can we get better for our players? How can we help the clubs more? So I guess the biggest challenge is to continue to innovate permanently.
So do you have any stories about those bad apples through your career?
Well, there's a lot of stories, isn't there? Bad apples. Look, I'll just go back on that point before. You do have players that let down. You do have agents that let players and clubs down. And the clubs as well. A lot of pressure on, especially when the player's not performing, to get rid of them, and players jumping ship at the first occasion. And then, rugby players are human beings. I mean, even though they're just like any athletes, we have a tendency to put athletes on a pedestal, and athletes are human beings and they can break down or make mistakes. But there's a couple of funny stories. which won't funny at the time, but in hindsight, you just have to laugh. I had a foreign player playing in France. He was moving from one professional club to another, and the club he was at, he was provided a car through one of the sponsors from the club, but it was a leasing deal. So he was actually owned the car, and on a lease you have a duration, you pay every month, etc., etc. So before I moved to the other club, I said, make sure you take the car back, you terminate the lease. You might have to pay. Well, I spoke to the club and said, look, as you're terminating the lease before it's termed, you might have to pay a bit, but look, this is going to look out because you're going to a new club and they're going to provide you a car. So not on a lease, they're providing you a car, they're insuring it. So it's not yours, but you have a car, so you don't need that car. Okay. And then I get a call and said, oh, can I come and see you? Got to go, because he was playing in the town where I live, actually. He came up and handed me over a debt collector's letter. And I was saying, what's this? And he goes, I don't know. I said, are you sure? And he goes, yep. And I said, okay, well, you owe someone 22,000 euros. What's that for? And he goes, I don't know. So I rang the debt collectors and they said, it's actually for a car registration, blah, 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 blah. And this is owned by the garage, blah, blah, blah. So I said, thank you very much. So I said to the player, I said, mate, you know when I told you to take the car back in your old car, did you take that back? Very sheepishly, he smiled and then laughed. And I said, what did you do with it? I said, well, when I came to the new club, because I had to get down here, and I was going to get a mate to drive the car back, but he couldn't. I went in with someone from the club here, and they took it to the garage, and I sold it to them. And I said, you what? You sold it to them. I said, it's not yours to, well, it is yours to sell, but it's not technically yours to sell. And how did you manage to do that? Because, okay, it was the same car manufacturer, but two different garages. So, and I said, well, what did you do with the money? He said, oh, I built a house in my village. I said, you built a house with a village. So anyway, it sorted out. Like, I just looked at him and said, look, I just don't know how this has happened. I don't know how it could happen, but it was so innocent that it was just normal. So, look, I had to laugh. As again, I said, it was a bit of a situation. I had to laugh. It worked out all right, but that was just, one of the things that in hindsight, you look back at laugh, we have a good laugh, and we all exchange situations, which, but there are, you have career end. I think the toughest for us is career ending, and a lot of that through head knocks, promotions. We're getting more and more of that, and more of a younger age, and funnily enough, a lot on the backs. I've had 3 outside backs in the last, or 4, in the last 8 years, which is never good. But and obviously that's collisions at speed, isn't it? And but look, it's not good, but it is good in some ways because you are making players make decisions which are very tough. But the most important thing is their health and well-being. And as I say to them, life is very long after you stop playing rugby. And, we're only just sort of starting to find out what these knocks can do. But it's also having a role there to help players go through that, go through those situations. So that's always very, very tough. But, there could be knee injuries, could be, sometimes there's heart problems. Obviously in France, top level youth academy and professional rugby players are very, very well followed and monitored health wise. So that allows a lot of detection of potential problems, notably your head, your ticker, and your spine. But then again, it's always up to a player to make that decision, but helping them run through that, that's always when they have to finish. And sometimes at a young age when they're just developing, that's always very, very tough.
Yeah. And just to finish on, is for anyone looking to become an agent, what's some advice you could give them, and how would they go about it?
Most important thing is to be passionate about your sport, to enjoy it, treat it as a game. Obviously, when you watch a game, you watch your players, and your players are the best, and the others are dirtbags. Um, but also, you have to be very passionate about what you're doing and like people, because you do build strong relationships. So it's about liking people, and also starting up or getting involved like a coach with people who are already established in the industry. That's very important because you'll learn a lot. It's like it's very hard when you're starting off by yourself, is because there's already people established. New is good. Clubs like it. But if you're still in the learning process, you're an easy prey for clubs to dominate negotiations. And also, it's tough to convince players to join and come and work with you where there's already a lot of people established. So it's getting there, learn the ropes, enjoy the game. And because if not all the top agents have played rugby, or most of them all have, but a lot have. Those other agents are great negotiators. They're very innovative, but they bounce off a lot of it. It's about bouncing off your work colleagues as well, and people and staff. And you might think a player's going to make it, but there's maybe signs there that there's not, but you're ignoring them. There's maybe signs where you think he's good, but he's good, but you're not quite sure if he's going to make it. But there are signs there that other people see, said, no, mate, he's got it. He'll get there. It's about bouncing off. It's because it's not, as you know, it's not an exact science.